You know, there's a lot of different situations where people share energy, and you don't want to share energy with certain people. And if people really knew on a deeper level what was going on below the surface with our energy fields and how it could be affected by other energy fields, people might think twice about who they have sex with, for example, hang out with, go out and drink with, people that they smoke weed with. And there's a lot of different ways in which we share energy. And it is true. I believe in the whole concept of the oneness principle, but there's also some deeply troubled energies out there that love human hosts. And human hosts, to bring this back to something out of the Matrix, Agent Smith represents the Matrix. Neo representing that person on this path, and a path of awakening. And Agent Smith manifesting through these various people in the streets. And I would describe these, because this is all metaphoric, as those people in our realities that are in fact weak spiritually. So weak spiritually that they can, in some cases, be hijacked. And so it's important for people in urban environments, in rural environments, to keep their house clean. And it's not easy to do that. We live in a world, I would say that when we talk about nature, nature has a particular code. Nature is not to be worshipped. We should respect nature, but nature can't be terraformed. So when people talk about also human nature, that is something that is also socially engineered. And so there's a lot we don't know with how sophisticated this whole human slavery operation actually is. I mean, I don't want to go too far off topic and sound sci-fi, but we talk about the tracking and tracing of a human being. Well, first of all, i.e. the archons, spiritual parasites, they do use the internet. I do believe that, to toy with particular human beings, but they don't necessarily need the internet as a conduit, as a portal. There are other things that are portals, that are conduits, that were around before the internet. But the internet can enhance, obviously. Logic only shows this, but I think that I've experienced this. Periods of bad luck. In and around periods in which I'm signing back onto the internet after being off the internet for a period of time. Just kind of gauging the results and how kind of reality seems to shift or be the same, whether I'm on the internet or off the internet, as I have been the last couple of weeks. Separating this residence from the internet for at least 2 months. So I can see how the internet is a portal. It's also something to be used for good. So when we're not actively using the internet for something good, or creating positive things for people to think about, consume, right? We shouldn't be idle, letting elements of the internet consume us. You know, it's actually said that we're products. The real customers are the advertisers on Facebook, on these social media platforms, and that includes YouTube. And so we talk about stepping back from objects of intrusion. This isn't solely supernatural. You know, things can almost become animated thought forms, or thought forms could turn into what we would call a spiritual attack on a person. An abundance of negative thought forms caused by specific videos, in particular weak individuals, can potentially provoke a response. There could be actual psychological operations underway beyond anything we've ever been able to conceive, either on YouTube videos or certain websites where certain frequencies may hold a particular message, a subliminal message. There could be a incremental building up of a sleeper agent army within our own nation. The very people that think that they are the awakened ones, woke to certain conspiracy truths, some of them are targeted and put into specific programs as far as I'm concerned. See, when we talk about targeting, we do need to return to this conversation. A lot of people think they're being gang stalked by their neighbor or their government, when there is some sort of a spiritual parasite, spiritual werewolf, whether or not you use the term archon. We use the term archon loosely, but when you come to the question, what is an archon? Who are the archons? It is very much at that level of what is the matrix. Because we are dealing with something that is difficult to describe, but to a certain degree has an existence. But it is to a certain degree beyond our reality, but yet there seems to be some sort of an intersection. And at the same time, when I use that, I'm also thinking what is also called the lower self, that there could be a part of our self that's tied in with that world just simply because I would say we're a soul that's inhabiting a body. We're not really the body, by the way, as many have said and say. We are not really the body. We are not really the mind. We are the soul that is animating this biological matter. I am animating this biological matter, this DNA expression, but that's not my true identity. I am not my name. I am just living in this existence, in this time-space reality, for whatever gosh darn reason, in this body. There are things I have learned in this body. I can see that there's like a part of myself that is beyond this body, and then there's like the body's wiring and like predispositions. That includes fear. There is the fight or flight. There's certain frequencies, imagery. We get back into the conversation of psyops with regards to internet media, and certain people can have a disposition to respond to some of those frequencies and combination of stimuli in a very adverse way. Whereas others, whether it's genetic or simply their spiritual backbone, that's able to be more insusceptible, almost like a superhero, able to hold back with their own field, right, and mental strength, those objects of intrusion. Nowadays, when you go on YouTube and you look for information, how to defend yourself against spiritual attack, you find more people talking about this stuff, don't you? If you've looked. And then you can go and click filter on YouTube, psychic protection or information. And there's different things and different perspectives. But notice how this has become increasingly an issue in recent decades. Again, I talk about the old days, nostalgia, 70s and the 80s. What is another reason that people go back and they like to relive music from that era that almost seems to be a period of innocence? It's the romance. You see, when they were putting out a music or a tune that was promoting love and getting down on it on the dance floor and having a good time, even if it was monkey see, monkey do, and maybe it was propaganda to create a baby boom. I got all kinds of ideas that kind of go back and forth in my own mind. But what was going on during that period? There really were a lot of love songs. There really was a lot of that love child generation, sunchild generation, and there was also a lot of solar flares, by the way. Unusually high from what I read. We had Mount St. Helens in 1980. I was born. There you go. Afghanistan was invaded. A whole bunch of other stuff was happening between the late 70s and 80s. Major shift in drugs from cocaine to heroin. I mean, things are just off the charts. And the music. But yes, high solar flares, more sexuality, baby boom. I have made that connection. The reason I go back to that is we can see the effect of the media, the times, the energy on the population. And it was good for a certain amount of time. I think the 80s featured a lot of the, divorces and broken romances, and the music kind of represents that. But even going back into the 1980s, and with all due respect to metalheads and death metalheads, I don't really listen to it as much right now, but old school Megadeth and some old school Metallica. I'm not really a metalhead, but I like, the Headbangers Ball and when I was a kid and certain things. I'm not like of the same ideology of those that were promoting the Satanic Panic. But at the same time, have we not seen a rise in Satanism? within our society in this transition from the 70s to the 80s, as more people were listening to the radio. The radio. See, even before the internet, the radio was used as this object of mass broadcast. And this concept of subliminal messaging goes back, obviously, as most of you know. They were talking about messages for whatever reason. And I've always wondered this, and I always wanted to know the truth, but never had it. Why were there messages allegedly put on a Led Zeppelin album back in the day? When I was a kid, I was fascinated with this. I didn't want to brainwash anyone, but actually want to know how did they do this? How did they do this? And is this being duplicated on a massive level now? And these were things that I would think about as a child in the 80s going to the 90s. I had a couple other thoughts. One was about the grid going out. As a child living in Aurora, 25 miles south of Portland, sitting there one day, I think my mom asked me to saw some piece of wood she was doing for an art project in half. And I remember just sitting there daydreaming, not wanting to do it, and thinking about the robot apocalypse, or a day and age where our minds are being scanned. There were a lot of periods in which I was alone. I wouldn't really call these visions, but I called it before a waking knowing. We're just sitting there daydreaming, maybe at a certain point in life. I was thinking, what if? I can remember when I was 16, creative writing, like 101, one of those types of, was it the 10th grade? I'm in Springfield, Virginia. There's a period in which I had to move around as a result of ping pong with the parents. But anyway, I was writing about being, getting into a time machine and robots serving people food in the year 2030 in Portland, Oregon. You know, and being literally taken away by robots by not having my proper identification card. Again, it's like something out of H.G. Wells, my own modern take version of the time machine. And going just into 2030, and it's interesting because 2030 happens to be the years later, as I get involved in the research community, they talk about the UN Agenda 2030. And then this would be several years after what I've been projecting, 2025, this apex. Not only for the solar cycle, but things that tend to occur when there is a maximum of solar flares. Things like world wars. So right now, what we're seeing right now is building and building and building. And I think people would realize what is going on if they weren't so brainwashed. Right? So they don't necessarily need to censor all these people and yada, yada, yada. It's distract them with these objects of intrusion. Mass media mind control. You know, and yes, there's concerns about YouTube's direction, YouTube's demonetization, but YouTube's not going away. YouTube is obviously a massive source of distraction. And even for myself, I've talked about, you know, this digital detox. And what is it for? What is it from? It just double checking. Not a big deal, folks. Not hearing voices from the internet or nothing. I'm just gauging. Okay, so what are the dreams like? Does it seem like there's still some of that same type of simulation? You know, where like it almost seems like we're in a dream simulation. Where it's like, whoa, this isn't like a vision or something healthy. This is. And I talk about spiritual protection, archonic interference in human lives. I think things like that can put a guy on the radar. I think that's normal, right? You talk about that, you need to be strong enough. A strong enough energy field to deal with that which comes with talking about something so powerful. And I think that I have underestimated how powerful it is. I didn't say all powerful. I didn't say more powerful than us. Let me give you an analogy. There could be somebody that's very powerful, able to knock you out with one punch, if they're able to land that punch. If the person is aware enough, and they're able to block that punch, may have brass knuckles, right? For example, you don't want to get hit with that fist. You want to be good enough to be able to evade that or get out of the way. I believe certain people are going to be at a certain level of mastery to get out of the way of that object of intrusion. How does this apply to everything else? I want to address, you know, that level of personal discipline that a man has to go through to step away from the modern temptations of today's day and age. and why I live off the grid and not in the city. And there was a time where I would talk about things and still go to the bar. I'm not anti-drinking. I'm not. When I do have a beer, it's an IPA. It's a microbrew. I don't have something against it. I'm actually, and I believe in the responsible use of cannabis, but any heavy addiction from internet to any substance can be a way that people can be controlled by entities because they can check out. And something else that really likes a human being that likes that particular substance can check in. Objects of intrusion. I don't believe in channeling. I believe in trying to access the higher self, which is within. Some people even say that voice in your head that may give you accurate information, and you don't necessarily know where it's coming from. I'm not actually talking about hearing things, folks. I'm talking about kind of a hunch, that inner knowing, and sometimes the inner knowing will reveal itself. I'm just going to tell you right now, I had an inner knowing that said, Alex, don't go to town for a few days. Go to town like next week. Just inner hunch. Well, I didn't listen to that. And that's the moment I got the ticket. It was on the 31st, end of the month. Because those cops are rarely at that spot doing that. I just happened to walk into that on the 31st, 7:35 in the morning. I get up early. Early bird catches the worm. Early bird gets a ticket too. Something told me don't go down that road. I went anyway. I'm going to get off the hill. I'm going to go get some food, something, do something. But see, I've benefited from going out, doing other things, working other jobs, including fast food, running food, washing dishes. I've also seen how entangling my energy in other places has caused me some complications. Sometimes, to expand this conversation in my own experiences, in order to raise my energy field, I want you to understand this fluctuates like a field, like a sound wave. Like the effect of the geomagnetic field before and after a solar flare hits it. It fluctuates. Boom, 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 boom. Think about that DJ bass. Boom, boom, boom. It's a wave. It's a sound wave. So we're going back and forth with these energies, back and forth beyond words. I can't even think it's described. Electrons, protons, just all different types of energy. It's also said that we have 50 trillion cells that are communicating with the environment around us. What about communicating with the people around us? What about communicating with the technologies around those people, like cell phones, and that whole magnetic field consciousness and what that entails? And how that really affects us, like secondhand cell phone exposure. Wrap your mind around that. Non-cell phone user, being around cell phone users, and the effects of that. That's what I'm getting at. We are bombarded with natural and unnatural electromagnetic fields. And I truly do believe, and I think that more humans are going to be sounding this alarm, the more unnatural, the more cancers, the more what they'll call mental illness. What I'll call full-blown demonic, archonic. I use the words interchangeably, so do others. Archonic has its source in Gnostic writings, whereas demonic in Christian. There are some parallels. And so that's to be understood. And I think that in some of these environments, these artificial environments, there's a lot of this unnatural magnetic fields, there could be doorways that are opening. And certain things can ground out an individual. If someone ends up really dirty, now think about the homeless people that are in a lot of these urban environments with a lot of these energies, and people have noticed they're getting a little bit crazier, especially in certain cities. What is the real root cause? I mean, if we're talking about homelessness, some of them have been homeless for a while. But when you look at like the extremities of some of the mental illnesses, how can we say for sure that there aren't objects of intrusion that are somehow connected with this wide barrage of technology that's surrounding these humans today? When we talk about 5G technology, if there aren't people already talking about the potential connections between 5G technology and demonic / archonic intrusion, they should. Because too much of that electromagnetic frequency, and I even think about some of these libraries, it can literally, especially if someone's negative thought forms are out in the open, it could cause some problems. So I've developed some theories. I don't know how much of I want to make public, It's not that I'm superstitious. I understand the power of words and the power of thoughts and the power of intentions. And I believe most of all in empowerment. So here's what I'm going to say. I've seen specific examples where sharing physical items with people that are unclean with weak spirits can cause that Agent Smith type of matrix effect in someone else, in someone doing something to me, by simply sharing energy. Facebook can be a conduit where there could be some sort of an interference in some cases, right? Maybe we're talking about something positive. I haven't really noticed this lately, but I've noticed this in the past. I've also drawn connections between those periods in which we're seeing more solar flares and more people flipping out. I believe it could be used as a conduit for breakthroughs, whether someone's aware of it or not, new ideas and a new expression of energy. But that electromagnetic spectrum is also a gateway. Someone can be clearly on the dark side. You know, instead of just doing like a little bit of drugs, they're doing like a whole rail of methamphetamines and then some. I see clear, direct patterns. It's not that I'm blaming the sun. It's that it's mankind, womankind's natural nature. But it's believed that men are a little bit more responsive to the sun. To be more active in whatever it is that they're doing on the field of life, in this physical world, when there's more solar rain and solar plasma and that life force. Now, what someone does with that life force, and whether that's right or wrong, that's also a matter of perspective. But anything from productive contributions to society to various types of assaults on other forms of life. Predator behavior. The predator animal killer instinct comes out in elements of human society. And I believe that the spiritual parasites that I believe are in the real control of this world government structure that not everyone sees, but it's there. There's a science, there's an understanding. There's a reason why in 1918 they locked away a Russian for this knowledge of the links between solar flares and large wars breaking out. On another level of the control structure, the dark side of the occult, of the power elite that's using that knowledge of positions of moons, planets, but solar activity. This is not something the conspiratorial research community has yet really latched onto. There's something they know about our own human physiology. Cause and effect, pushing buttons. People are pumped up by that energy. It's like that energy bump, bump, bump from a nightclub. Bump, bump, the heartbeat, the pulse of the solar flare. There are periods in which the people are straight up rioting and they're acting like they're losing their minds. Like, yes, you're toppling statues, you're running over this. And I'm not talking about something specific with regards to the Confederate statues. I'm doing all types of situations where it's just like, yes, that's the awakening. The people just running and over-toppling buildings and just that being like the revolution, just like the symbol of the fist. And it's just like facepalm. You know, the idea of evolving beyond the cesspool that a number of human beings have allowed to manifest is much more than storming buildings and like hanging the bankers or something like that. I don't agree. Self-responsibility means looking at these objects of intrusion. People have been led into a cold-hearted... You know, I'm not so sure if I'm going to take one position or another, whether that's our true nature or not. We can take a look at that. People have clearly been led into a cold-hearted, like snake-like, reptilian-like, I'm being metaphoric, but we can be literal. I'll grant you the freedom to believe whatever you want to believe. What I believe is we have been led into this dark side of mankind consciousness. You know, I can even see my own, even when I was young, and I may not have liked my entire life with my mother. I could see how if I lived with my father and had a funner life in Portland during those 80s, I would have gotten into a lot more trouble as a young Alex Ansary running around Portland, Oregon in the 80s, as opposed to living with my mother in the country on 40 acres in a more sheltered way of life. I could feel early on the influence, the field of Portland, Oregon. And how when I visited my dad, I was mentioning this recently, Weekend Dad, and yes, the neighborhood became popular after my dad's time there between 86 and 93. Around 22nd and Southeast Clinton Street. And 26th and Clinton is a popular area. The point is, I was sensitive enough to feel the difference in energy how I felt by the city. I honestly enjoyed getting away from what I felt to be a controlling mother and life in the boring country without any neighbors. And I grew up very isolated as a child. Maybe you didn't all know that my adulthood is oddly enough just matching a childhood, only I'm not going to school now. But there's reasons, there's benefits to not growing up in a cesspool or a ghetto or living in one as an adult. Sometimes it's better to be lonely contemplating the nature of reality with trees around us and a quiet breeze, as opposed to the smog outside our doorstep, with yet maybe another nightclub or a way to entertain ourselves. Not to put anyone down that is enjoying their lives in the city. I think there's a lot of positive things. But again, we're getting this theme of objects of intrusion, and some people, even by nature, whether it is our nature or not, and there could be a period where some people start waking up while other people start going to sleep. Kind of like we call like the split in consciousness, and they're going to have to learn discernment as parts of their awareness open up. Because those objects of intrusion can come through supposed spiritual leaders that are channeling particular messages. And it can come through them, and I've seen it. And I believe by even calling some of these people out by name that are big-time assets of what I call and others call the archons, you can bring some bad luck or some energy backlash. And it's like, you know, when talking about those things and even the objects of intrusion, that things that people need to protect their minds against, a person needs to remain strong at all times. If videos like that are going to be put on YouTube for years and years and years and years and years. It's messing with their food, pure and simple. This society has shown this could change, but it's shown no real change in direction, from labeling the person a witch or insane for discussing such matters. This appears to be the plight, right, of those individuals, those Gnostics that, like it or not, keep incarnating and returning and appearing. No matter how tyrannical, no matter how much devastation, no matter how many people are killed, right? Just this, it's like in nature, it's like in the biological code, the human biological code, a certain gnosis as to how things actually are. It's within you, it's within me. I believe that. We have to go deep within whatever it is that we are to get that source, to get that information. I don't necessarily have the roadmap how to get there, and I don't necessarily know that I am there at all times. It wanes and waxes. Like the politics of the moon from here and there. And there are certain periods in which we have a strong field, like our planet has a strong field, and we're able to keep out those objects of intrusion. Attempts at mind control. Attempts at hacking to batter us down. To push down the fortress. Our strong self-image. Our belief in ourselves. Our belief to make the world a better place. And there are these forces that come against us, almost like that's the nature of the matrix of the world that we're in, to batter down our beliefs that our lives have purpose. And that's what's going on. There is this battle, and it's hidden, and it's not necessarily seen. But again, that's why I call it like that inner lower self. The archonic sabotage and interference is not just simply outside of ourselves. There could be times in which we are weak, in which we act. To use the word possess as a strong stretch of the word, but are there shades of gray with regards to this word possession? Archonic interference. Our lower self being more active than our higher self. And we can maybe even see ourselves, I know I've seen it in my own life, do certain things where we are the ones that set ourselves up. And we look back maybe weeks after the fact and go, what the frock? Did that have to go down that way? Or was there something within our own operating system that was not functioning as strong as it should, and bad decisions were made? Bad decisions were made that didn't have to be made. We should have been looking at the situation from another perspective, a wider angle. Continuing to talk about this general theme here, and then we'll close and come back with more. There are links down below if you want to support this work. I am going to continue doing this full time, but it requires that I maintain some serious self-discipline in my own life in order to do that. The feedback that I've gotten over the years is that this is one of the most important topics on this channel. And throughout different years and different times, I've had these experiences that have been thrown at me. I've speculated, have some of these bad luck experiences had something to do with my video series? Would things have been better if I just never went on this path of just sharing my ideas as a philosopher on YouTube about psychic protection against spiritual attack, alien intrusion, archonic intrusion? Does it come with a price? I don't believe that it comes with a price that in the end is something that we can't overcome and turn around to be something positive. You know, there's going to be certain ways that we're tested. If we're actually on that path of sharing information, there are tests that are thrown at us that are personal. And there are things that I don't need to bring to YouTube anymore, or for the first time. You know, in my own battles, I guess, if you would say, with them and with my own lower self, there's ways in which I've had to find ways to evolve. And am right now. Last thing we want to do is start poking the bear. And I refer to this work and try to wake people up as poking the bear. When you're effing with their food and attempting to help people learn how to protect themselves and disconnect from these objects of intrusion, a person doing that sharing on the internet has to be ready for the blowback. And it's trial and error. Trial and error. And talking about the influence of the solar cycles on their strength to hack our consciousness or invade our dreams or interfere with people that are involved in our lives, I've been measuring that. And whether there are periods where there's more of that, what's going on with the moon, what's going on with the sun. And then over time, now over a decade of discussing these matters, we're going into that second decade of discussing psychic protection and spiritual warfare and how it really plays out, even in the modern political arena, from, I guess, a parapolitical perspective, if you will, that is not plagiarizing somebody else's radio show and content. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the things that I'm saying. But as we close here, I come back to this. There is this truth within. We may hear other people, right, talk about certain things that help us wake up. And I've had that experience. People like Clyde Lewis in 2003 talking about the implantable microchip, the implantable what, who? And here I am, I'm on this path of awakening way back when, stay up all night, literally downloading things about Digital Angel and things of that nature. And then it woke me up to other things and other truths. It wasn't so much about Clyde Lewis being a saint or having all the answers or me having all the answers when I've shared something that helped, quote unquote, wake somebody else up to a particular truth. It's a chain of truth that is timeless and beyond personality. And it is connected in with that field of protection, spiritual protection. There's certain things out there, just to go over this, that are part of our physical makeup, and it's the excess. And nightclubs come to mind, drugs and alcohol, things in which people are trapped in the body. And there are people out there that oftentimes, and it can be fun going back and forth till, you know, one gets drained too much or makes a really bad decision when, like, oh, I don't know, having one too many drinks and then going somewhere and getting a DUI. This happens to a lot of successful people. And what also happens to a lot of successful people is problems with drugs and alcohol in some cases, where they were enjoying like their fruits, and then it goes into a certain direction to where they reach this apex of creating something or receiving something. Maybe they just had some really good luck, a really good album, a really good real estate deal, or something rather, a really good few years working for a certain place, and then certain other bad habits come in, and certain behaviors and certain addictions that are unhealthy. And thus, these become these doorways to the objects of intrusion, or ways in which a person's magnetic field, aura, is weakened to the point to where these entities can influence them. And ultimately, like, we are fish in a sea, an electromagnetic soup, mostly unnatural in these dense population environments. And a lot of people unconsciously are in these addictive ways of life including sex addiction, to heal themselves from the damage that's been done to their energy fields, their energy centers. Some call them chakras. So people may be out there unconsciously trying to heal parts of themselves, right? Or smoking themselves into oblivion. I've done it. I've lived these things. And it's like there's a real root cause. And are we given the real root cause, right? By conventional science, by conventional self-help gurus. And so it's good to be positive, right? And turn things around. But we've got to identify the root cause, the problem, on that path to being positive. You know, and doing certain things like exercising and the whole array of healthy activities. What needs to be removed from our consciousness? From radio shows to certain types of music, frequencies. You know, are we able to sit in our own thoughts? Are we able to sift through our own thoughts, holding the discernment, observing our thoughts, and realizing whether that's us or not? Being able to recognize if that's our higher self, or perhaps our lower / archonic lower self that's connected into this other world that's just there to simply sabotage us through our own thoughts. But it's the awareness that there is a choice. And this subject goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And we'll come back. I'm Alex Ansary, reminding you the path to the ultimate truth regarding these matters and others still lies within.